The logic of your red, black, and green Negro just astonishes me. I just read a blog comment on my blog that just pretty much, it boggled my mind. Now, this person left a comment on my blog, www.shawnsjames.blogspot.com, telling me that they didn't want to buy the books from the ISIS East-Team crossover Kickstarter because they thought the images were too light-skinned. And when I realized, because what they were doing was they went into this long, drawn-out thing talking about, um, they took a breadcrumb. Really, what they did was they took a breadcrumb from a single paragraph and used that as an excuse to not support buying the books from the ISIS East Team crossover Kickstarter. And what they said was, Salli Richardson, actress Salli Richardson, who is the inspiration for the character East Team here, um, was not a black. They said actress Salli Richardson was not a black person, but a biracial person. Now, this was the breadcrumb or the garnish on the plate that they used to not buy these two books, ISIS Night of the Vampires and East Team Undercover, two African American fantasy titles featuring an African American female characters. And this is what they used to formulate their strawman argument towards not supporting the product. Um, they came at me and said Salli Richardson wasn't black, and that the characters on the covers were too light skinned, and this was their excuse. And then when I followed up on the comment to see, how ridiculous their argument was, they come at me and I said to them, "So I guess you're not buying a book." They come back at me and say, "No, I'm not buying a book because the characters are too light skinned." Now, I listened to this sheer insanity and I said, what's really insane about this is you're saying that the characters are too light, but when you look at the spectrum of African American characters in fantasy, there aren't that many at all, one. And two, most of the time there is, when they are African American, you don't really see anybody getting into a skin tone debate. And it just, again, baffled my mind, for this person to take this straw man argument and, use it as a reason to not support a black product created by a black man. And this person, which was really strange, is said they donated to my Kickstarter last year for ISIS Wrath of the Cyber Goddess. Now, I've gone into my reasons for about the ISIS character, and I've gone into them in depth. I've talked about how her golden skin um, relates to Egyptian and Nubian mythology, and how it relates because people with golden skin, or as I put it, that's the way um, I see it. Because the gods were, back in the days, in the ancient times, gods had skin made of gold. Not skin made of gold, but they made statues of gods, like Isis and Osiris. They usually made them out of gold and fine jewels. And was one of the reasons I had for Isis's golden skin. But, these Negroes take that and they turn that into a straw man argument and a position to not support the product, especially these pro-blacks. They use this as an excuse not to support the product. Now, my reasons for creating this African American heroine and giving her that skin tone, again, relate to Egyptian mythology and African American history, and the reasons for Isis's hair, same in this action figure, relate to Seth, and because Seth had red hair, and I used it as a recessive trait. Plus, it makes the character, look a bit more distinct than your standard. Everybody has the same look and the same black hair, and that was one of the reasons why I gave Isis that distinct look. Because when it comes down to African American characters, oftentimes they make it where we all look the same. Um, have the same features, the same look, and I really wanted the character to look distinct. But what I'm running into lately, is this straw man argument that people use. They take, again, a breadcrumb such as a skin tone, and they use the skin tone as a reason to not buy the product, talking about, it's going to mess up little black girls' minds, when that was never the case at all. What I was trying to do is, diversify things, because whenever I go to a comic book board or a fantasy board, you know, and or I go in to look at comic panels of black superheroes, everybody pretty much has the same skin tone. Everybody pretty much has the same look, give or take a facial feature here or there. There's nothing really distinct, about many of these African American characters. This was about me trying to create diversity among African Americans, but yet, for some people, they just don't understand, you know, what I'm trying to do. I mean, just like there are so-called dark-skinned African American heroes, there should be, people of all different skin tones and different skin textures. I mean, African American, for me, again, is a spectrum. It's not just one definition of black. And that's something that's important to me because I really want to show, a diversity of images and, a diversity of skin tones and a diversity of experiences. Because for me, it's about creating that broader spectrum and that bigger picture for people to see, what the black experience is. And, I look at this person and I said to myself, you donated to my Kickstarter to help me with these covers, and now, last year, but this year, you're coming at me saying, characters are too light skinned, and I'm looking at this light skin, dark skin issue, and it's not constructive to say that you want black characters, but you want them all to be the same way. I mean, you can't say I want just one type of black character. In order to have that bigger picture, that broader picture of what African Americans are and the African American experience is, we need to see different people, from different walks of life and different cultures and different experiences, and we need to see um, all those peoples and all those experiences so people can get a clear understanding of what is black. And this is something, many of your pro-blacks just don't understand, that there is more than one so-called black experience. When you put it in that type of narrow perspective, it pretty much puts people, ironically, back into the same stereotypes that people complain about, regarding white supremacy and racism. I mean, this is the same stereotypes that your white supremacist uses. That everybody black has to be the same way. Everything black has to have the same skin tone, the same skin texture. And this light skin, dark skin debate, it really is what people use to keep from dealing with things that don't fit a certain narrative. This is something I just find all the time. Whenever I present, books like these, you know, people use the light skin, dark skin issue to avoid dealing with the content involved. So, ironically, it's just like your average racist. They use the color of the skin to avoid dealing with the content of the material. And, this is just something I've run into, dealing with African Americans over the last 2 years when I started, trying to make efforts to improve the quality of my book covers. Because a lot of times people were saying, oh, the book covers are bad, and they use that as an excuse. But when I start to improve the quality, now it becomes a light skin, dark skin debate. Um, the second part of this issue, because this is the breadcrumb that, this individual used, was saying that, because Eastham here is inspired by actress Salli Richardson, was to say that, actress Salli Richardson was biracial, and this was the reason for not supporting, the books in my ISIS Eastham Kickstarter crossover and trying to buy the paperbacks or the ebooks. So they used that as the breadcrumb to say that that was their reason for not supporting it because this was a biracial actress. Now, I'm going to get into that because when I look at Salli Richardson Richfield's background, she has made a lot of great contributions to African American film and helped out a lot of African American filmmakers, like like the director Ava DuVernay that people are celebrating now. This was the movie she made back a couple of years ago, I Will Follow, that she made before she became critically acclaimed for Selma. And Salli Richardson Whitfield starred in this movie. She pretty much gave one of the most beautiful performances I have seen in years. And nobody ever talks about this film. All they talk about is Selma. And the reason why they talk about Selma is because Selma fits the narrative many Negroes have about being poor, miserable, downtrodden victims of white supremacy and racism, just like your pro-blacks use. You see, that movie fit the narrative. This movie, which featured a woman dealing with the death of her aunt, is a very humanized story, and no, most people will not support this movie. Every every year I watch this movie at least once or twice, and it's a very humanized movie. It's one of the reasons why I'm a big fan of actress Salli Richardson Whitfield, because she will take the time to work with, you know, a director like Ava DuVernay on this type of film, and present that humanized portrayal. Now she has starred in other films that I'm a big fan of, like Your Black Dynamite. She was in this movie, another one many African Americans don't want to talk about or don't want to support because, again, doesn't fit the narrative. And, one of my favorite films was this movie, How You Like Me Now. This was one of her first movies. Again, it features another beautiful humanized performance. And she worked with another black filmmaker here. In all three of these films, she worked with black filmmakers. You know, Black Dynamite here was produced by Michael Jai White, and it was directed by a black man. I Will Follow was directed by Ava DuVernay. And How You Like Me Now, I can't remember the name of Daryl Roberts. Yeah, Daryl Roberts um, directed and produced this great film. And again, she has always worked with African American directors and has participated in group economics on that level, and even with her own Kickstarter when she was trying to get the Lena Horne play funded last year, A Lady Must Live. Again, that play was written by a black man. But according to this Negro, this red, black, and green Negro, Salli Richardson is biracial, so he doesn't have to support her projects, even though this woman has made every effort to support African American projects all throughout her career. And, has lent time to support those projects while she was working on other projects as well. So, this is one of the reasons why I'm a big fan of hers, and I'm a big fan of her projects. I mean, I became a fan of hers way back in 1994 when I heard her voice on Gargoyles, and I loved the portrayal that she gave of Detective Elisa Maza. And that was one of the things that inspired me to create the East Team character, the East Team character here way back then. And I wanted to, back in the day, when I first created ISIS, I wanted to create, a villain on the level of a Maleficent or an Ursula. Because back then, when I was writing ISIS, when I was creating it, because I created East Team and I put her on the shelf for a while because I was inspired by her. But then in 1999, when my sister and I were sitting at the dinner table and we were talking about black female superheroes, I decided, yeah, I liked that character's voice, and I decided to, bring it up in a story, the ISIS story. I wanted to create the story of an African American princess, an African American goddess, and touch on things like Egyptian mythology, Nubian mythology, African American history, and I wanted to put it all together. And the East Team character was the villain I created, to be the antagonist to the ISIS character, the ISIS character here, back then. And I wanted, to do this to help little black girls, have that heroine that they could relate to and identify with, and to see, their history and culture from that, again, from that broader perspective, taking it all the way from um, ancient Egypt and ancient Nubia all the way to America. And that was one of the things that I wanted to do with the first ISIS book, because that really meant a lot to me to, to try to create that type of character. Because I really, back then, I wanted to create this kind of, Egyptian Morgan Le Fay with the East Team character. It was supposed to be this, villain. But over time, as I began, working with the character and developing the character, over time, she became a heroine in and of herself. And to this date, she's the second most popular character on the SJS Direct imprint, right behind Nikki Desmond from All About Nikki. Um, but to some people, all they do is they look at the color of the character's skin and they don't look at the content of the character. They don't see, the richness and complexity of the characters that I create or the stories that I produce. For them, it's all about skin tone. And for them, because the character's skin tone, is a certain shade, that character is not black. And that's really, sad because the sad irony is these same Negroes, what they will do is they will embrace a character like a Black Panther or a Storm or a Vixen who was created by a white man, and they will say that's a black character. And for them, I really, it's really sad that they can't support a black product created by a black man, but they will go out and support white characters created by non-black people, and aren't made with their best interests at heart. When I created, characters like your ISIS and your East Team and your ISIS, I did so with making an effort, to you know create those positive images of black women and to create role models for little black girls. I came into this, wanting to show, things like your African American history, your African American culture, you know, the role of black women in the black community, um, social concepts such as group economics, because in Night of the Vampires, there are several chapters where I go into group where the characters participate in group economics in the heroic adventures. And in East Team Undercover, we see a black woman, taking the lead in the role from the role of a black woman. These are things that I, ingrain into all the themes of my stories, and this is something that most people, they don't see because they're so busy judging the books by its cover, and they don't really look at the messages I'm trying to present, or the messages I'm trying to convey. Instead, because they take that, crumb, that garnish off the table, they can't see what I'm trying to do regarding these stories and how I'm trying to create these humanized images of African Americans, these balanced images of African Americans. And I'm trying to, tell stories about black female characters that you don't see, in your mainstream media. Over the last 15 years, all I've seen in mainstream media regarding African American women are images of hood rats, ghetto women, all sorts of dysfunctional images. You know, the norm I'm seeing, is Cookie from Empire on mainstream media. I'm not seeing, images like this. Images like this, get buried by mainstream media. And the sad part is, you have black people who won't support this movie I Will Follow, and they won't support books like Isis, Wrath of the Cyber Goddess, where, your black woman is a superhero, or your East Team Undercover, or your Isis Night of the Vampires. They won't support this, and the sad part is, all of these products, again, created by black people, and feature balanced, humanized images of black people. The same thing with your Pride, again, your Great Debaters, directed by Denzel Washington, brilliant movie. We can't get anybody to go see this type of movie. And these movies all featured balanced images of African Americans, humanized images of African Americans, and, humanized portrayals of African Americans. This is what I grew up with as a kid. Because back in the day, I used to watch movies like Your Last Dragon, Your House Party, and Do the Right Thing. These were the movies I grew up with, and these were the images, these are the movies that inspired me, to create, works like your Isis Wrath of the Cyber Goddess, your Isis Night of the Vampires, your East Team Undercover. This is what inspired me. Were, movies like that. This is what I grew up with as a kid, and this is what I grew up with as a teenager. And when I turned 17 years old, way back in the 1990s, I made a dedication to myself to say I wanted to create positive images like this for kids of the next generation. I wanted to build on the legacies of people like your Bill Cosbys, your Spike Lees, your Robert Townsends, your Daryl Roberts. I wanted to create, those humanized, balanced images of African Americans in my stories. That was the mission that I had, set for myself at 17 years old when I returned to writing, because I really didn't, again, even back then, I didn't see that many balanced images. They were just a handful out there, and this was the era of the Cosby Show, the Different Worlds, the Sister Sisters, the Smart Guys. There weren't. It was when you see a positive image of an African American, a balanced image of an African American, it's a very, very rare thing to see. And this is one of the things that inspires me to get in front of the keyboard or even get in front of this video camera and put my work out there. It means the world to me, to try to create these type of images, because when I look at these light skin, dark skin issue, it really is not constructive, because when I look at it from a historical perspective, to say that you won't support these images because they're too light skinned, yet many of these same people, will have an image of Malcolm X in their room. And these pro-blacks will have an image of Malcolm X in their room. Again, Malcolm X was a light-skinned person whose hair was just about the color of Isis's and was almost about the same skin tone. But, you won't support a light-skinned woman, but you have a picture of Malcolm X on your wall. Again, backwards. And many of the people in the civil rights movement were also light-skinned. Like your Lena Horne was in the civil rights movement, marching and protesting right alongside your Diane Carroll and your Ruby Dee and your Harry Belafonte. And many of your people who were the heads of the NAACP back in the day, your Walter Whites, there were many of them were what people would call biracial or light-skinned, but they were all part of the civil rights movement, marching all together with dark-skinned people. So when people say they won't support something because it's light-skinned, they don't understand that, light-skinned people were in the same boat as dark-skinned people in the civil rights movement. And even today, they're still in the same boat, with the rest of us black people. So we're all black, and we have to understand that. There is, all of these crazy connotations that, people try to use to divide people, but at the end of the day, we're all black, and we all have to deal with, racism and all these other issues in our community, and all these intraracial issues in our own community. So in order to deal with those issues, we have to be like the people in the civil rights movement who said, look, this isn't even about, color. This is about, being treated like human beings, because I even go as far back as, your Emmett Till. Emmett Till was a light-skinned person. Are we supposed to say, because he was a light-skinned boy, we're not supposed to support him? I mean, Emmett Till was a light-skinned person. So, I listen to these arguments, how people can just take a garnish and use that as a reason to not support an African American product. Another African American can use that to not support an African American product. And I truly see it as, absolutely being backwards and completely dysfunctional. Here are these people who say that, they want to support group economics, but when the person produces a product that they don't like, then they don't want to participate in group economics. That, to me is backwards. I mean, a lot of your pro-blacks come up with these arbitrary reasons to define what black is. And when you look at their definition of what black is, it almost mirrors that of your racist white supremacists. Because from what I see about black, black is not just skin tone. It's the content of a person's character. It's their identity as a person. And it goes far beyond skin tone. That's one of the things that I try to present in almost all my stories, from stories about um, brown-skinned women, like in my novel The Thetas, to medium brown black women in books like my screenplay book All About Maryland, to again, more medium brown characters like your Nikki Desmond here and All About Nikki, one of the most popular books at SJS Direct, I'll point out. That's right. To fairer skinned women like your Cassandra Lee here, who was in the Cassandra Cookbook and A Recipe for Success. My mission as a publisher is to give you, the the broadest spectrum of stories and the broadest spectrum of experiences regarding African American characters, and to give you that, bigger picture, also can go in and point out, more medium brown characters like here in The Temptation of John Haynes here. Um, Another story inspired by actress Salli Richardson. But what I try to do is present, that broader picture of what African American is and what the African American experience is, because really, we really need to see those different stories and those different experiences, and see those different experiences so people can see that there is more than one shade of black, there is more than one texture of black, there is more than one black story, or more than one black experience. And we need to see those balanced, humanized images of African Americans so that everybody can understand, that there is no one story or one narrative of what it means to be African American. There is a diverse array of experiences, almost, that parallels your white culture, your Hispanic culture, your Asian culture. There is more than one, in the black community. But you have people who want to go into these, insignificant debates about dark skin and light skin, and they use that as a way, as the straw man to avoid, dealing with stories that don't fit their narrative, don't fit their experience, and they don't want to, expand their minds and expand, their perspective on black culture and what it really is within the black experience. And this is something, again, that means a lot to me. And it's one of the things that makes me so dedicated to producing content like that in your SJS Direct imprint, because I really want to produce those positive stories about the African American experience. And I want to give people, again, that broader picture of what it means to be an African American and what type of stories we have. That's why I, work so hard on fantasy stories, like your Isis Night of the Vampires, your East Team Undercover, or your Isis Wrath of the Cyber Goddess here, because I really want to give people, that, and all these other books back here, because it means a lot to me, to present those different stories, because you usually don't get those type of stories from mainstream media. Mainstream media will give us something like your empire from one spectrum, one set of stereotypes, or they'll just take us back to to the civil rights movement, or they'll take us to slavery. Those are the only three stories we get, and our narrative, is bigger and larger than that. When I look at material like, your How You Like Me Nows, your Black Dynamites here, your I Will Follows, your Prides, your Great Debaters, your Last Dragons here, and House Party. This is a classic for me. This is one of my, movies that define my teen years, and this other one defined my teen years, Do the Right Thing. I see, a bigger picture of, what the black experience is, what black culture is. And I look at, today's generation, and they're not really getting that big picture that I got growing up. I got Cosby Show. I got many of these great movies here. And I want kids to have the same, black experience that I had growing up, because I grew up in what I believe was a golden age. And in that golden age, we got that diverse array of experiences and diverse array of stories, and we told our own stories, about our culture and our history and, black culture and the things that, we defined it. And I look at today, everything is just so narrow and so, uneven. We're not getting that balanced picture. And that's why I work so hard at producing, all these books here at SJS Direct, creating these positive stories about the African American experience. Writing stuff like African American fantasy, like your ISIS series and your East Team series, and books like the Thetas here. I finally have it back here. I finally got a copy of it in paperback. Because I wanted to give African American girls that sorority story, because all these other girls, they get sorority stories, and I wanted to write ours. And I know there's other people who've written one, but that's one of the reasons why I worked so hard over the last, 6, 7 years on this SJS Direct imprint, even far back as before then in the 1990s. when I had started writing, because it means a lot to me, to get these stories out here. Because when I do get these stories out here, people are surprised. You know, they say to me, I never thought of black people that way. I never thought of the black experience that way. This is such a different take. This is so different. This is so unique. I have never, seen or experienced, black culture from this perspective. That's some of the responses I get from African Americans and even non-black people, because they look at these type of stories and they go, "Wow, that's just so different." And we really, and the odd thing is that what I see it as, this is normal life, but we just don't put it out there in mainstream media, and this is what black life really is. And I really wanted to put, these kind of stories out here. It's just sad to me to see somebody take, a breadcrumb such as, skin tone here, a skin tone of a character, the color of a character's skin, and use it to avoid dealing with the content of the material, because, you know, it shows that, we often talk about how white people judge black people, but here it is, we have black people judging black people in the exact same way. Now, that just really saddens me, and again, it shows me how much work I still have to do as a writer and as a publisher, in broadening people's and trying to broaden people's minds and give them that better understanding of what it means to be, African American, and as it relates to African American culture, and that it is bigger than most people think, and they need to get that understanding of what it is. Um, but it shows me again how much work I still have to do as a writer and as a creative person, because I really believe in presenting those positive stories about the African American experience and giving people that that bigger picture of that will help them understand clearly that there is one more than one shade of black, more one texture of black, and that our stories you know go far beyond this narrative that the white liberals in Madison Avenue in Hollywood have boxed him in. Your slave stories, your civil rights stories, and your urban stories. There's far more stories to that in the black community and black culture than these three narratives. I mean, and we need to see more to those stories than those three narratives. And that's something, this kid from the South Bronx who lives right in the heart of the ghetto is trying to do, with his writing and with his art. And it's just something that I have been trying to do since I was 17 years old, and I'm going to keep pushing at it, in spite of, people who are narrow minded like this, who want to take things into the light skin, dark skin debate, because I see things, from a broader perspective, and I'm hoping that people will start to see things from that broader perspective. You can pick up Isis Night of the Vampires here on Kindle Unlimited, and it's also in paperback. This is in paperback and Kindle Unlimited. If you have Amazon Prime, you can borrow Isis Night of the Vampires for free. You can pick up East Team Undercover. Again, the East Team character is inspired by actress Salli Richardson Whitfield. You can pick this one up in paperback and on Kindle Unlimited. You can just click the link on the description box. You can pick up Isis Wrath of the Cyber Goddess here. This was last year's cover by Bill Walker. The other two covers were done by Bill Walker as well. This is also available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited. And you can pick up these other two Isis series books, Isis All About the Goddess and Isis Power of the Princess, on Kindle Unlimited. They're also available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited. If you have Amazon Prime, you can borrow it for free. And you can pick up the inspiring, uplifting, sophisticated sorority story, The Thetas, in paperback and Kindle Unlimited. You can borrow this on Prime for free if you'd like as well. And you can pick up, if you want to learn more about black actresses in Hollywood, I highly recommend you get All About Marilyn. This is a very positive story about African American actresses in Hollywood and the issues and the struggles that they go through. This is also available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited. You can get this one for free. And you can get The Temptation of John Haynes here, also in paperback and on Kindle Unlimited. If you have Amazon Prime, you can borrow this for free. And you can also get the most popular SJS direct title, All About Nikki the Fabulous First Season, in paperback and on Kindle. This one is not on Kindle Unlimited, unfortunately, because, well, it's a very popular book, and, I can't put everything on Kindle Unlimited, but I have a lot of great books on Amazon.com. A lot of positive African American stories about the African American experience um, on my Amazon page, and you can pick them all up. Again, if you have Amazon Prime, you can borrow them for free if you have an ebook, e-reader, or Kindle, or you can just buy them in paperback and participate in group economics and help this struggling South Bronx author. Um, you can also pick up these great DVDs on Amazon.com, like How You Like Me Now, Black Dynamite, I Will Follow. Definitely pick this one up. This is a great movie. Pride, Great Debaters, another great movie. Last Dragon, one I love a lot. House Party, and the movie that pretty much makes a great social commentary on the Negro, Do the Right Thing. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe, and I'm really hoping you can go out and buy my books and participate in group economics, because it really helps me move forward. Again, I've been out of work for a while, so I really do need the money to continue producing books. Again, that's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.